Michael is going to take over. I feel somewhat unprepared because I no longer have his bio up. So, Michael, present yourself.
I'll do it.
Introduce yourself.
And I'm going to take the one question from Chris Morrison in the chat. What is the society's connection to LSIC? We don't have a specific relationship. I just know that several people that have been active in the society, including myself, have participated in some LSIC interest groups. But there's no formal kind of relationship. That's probably something that we should remedy and see whether or not there's ways we can actually create some permanent infrastructure for LSIC outside of the of its primary host organization. So yeah, good point, good question. So quick introduction for me and my topic. I'm the president of the Moon Society, but I'm also one of the general partners at Starbridge Venture Capital, which is a space-focused venture fund. Some of our fund investments include Axiom Space, Umbra Lab, which is synthetic aperture radar, a stem cell-based meat company, because if you're going to be settling space, you're not actually going to bring a cow if you want a burger, and a lot of other things that are enabling of space or are using space to enable technologies and surface on the surface of the Earth. And one of the things that we do and at Starbridge is Stephen Jorgensen, who is the founder of Starbridge, and myself spent a large amount of time early in 2020 developing the integrated space plan, this is the 2021 version hanging on my wall. It's available on the website. It's a replacement of the 2017 version, significant update. And one of the things that we found when developing the 2021 version was a singularity of sorts, an inability for us to be able to predict what comes after. And that was anything that touched or was related to Starship. When you look at what SpaceX is developing in that capability, even if it takes twice as long to develop, and their target is to get to the cost of a flight to be basically twice what the marginal cost of fuel is. And that's the methane and LOX that's on board. And that kind of payload capacity at that kind of a price is transformational to the degree that when we as a venture fund look out across the industry, with the exception of a company called Varda, which came out of Founders Fund and is planning on buying entire starships and building them out as factories. You fly the entire factory. The entire payload bay is a factory. It may have people on board or not. Yes, that version was developed with Ron Jones's input, and it goes back to him being involved in the past like 4 or 5 versions. The exception of Varda and some of the things that, for example, companies such as Axiom have kind of discussed about happening in the future, there are, unless they are purely stealth, which is kind of hard to do in this industry because everybody talks, we see no companies out there doing any planning around what to do with the capability of a Starship. No companies are raising money. Again, Varda is one exception. We see no one even discussing or beginning to raise money, even if someone had already had all the money they needed to be able to do this. They're not doing any hiring or any sales development as far as anyone in the industry can tell. And so it really is sort of, especially when we're doing the plan or anything else, it appears to be, for all intents and purposes, a singularity. it is difficult for our industry to see beyond what it would mean to have low cost launch of significant amounts of mass and habitable volume. And when I say no ideas, what we see are, and this has been our issue in the industry for a long time, we can all talk about the technology and what a moon base might look like, but when it gets down to, I need to raise the money to be able to go build these things, unless you are NASA, which is going to make a different value proposition decision when it comes to using Starship. We see no one out there actually building the customer case for any of this. What we do see are in-space transportation companies selling the same kilogram of water to each other over and over again. When it boils down to who's the actual customer for these things, the business models fall apart because no one has identified who the actual customer is, and no one is working to consolidate and identify those customers and sell them on what we're building. So I don't know if it's a failure of imagination or a failure of the continued failure of our industry to be customer focused versus technology focused. Or one of the options is the market exists, but no one understands how to help that market identify itself and get access to it and create structure within around that market demand. I do think that possibly is one of them. There's a large number of people who would like to go into space, but no one's actually figured out how to characterize that market sufficiently. But regardless, it does boil down to whether you're doing any kind of planning for the future. If we assume that, and I've got a couple of steak dinner bets on this, that there will be a fully fueled Starship ready to go anywhere you want to, sitting in low Earth orbit by sometime in the first half of next year, which is less than a year from now. What do you do with it? What do you do with it, and how do you pay for one, and who are you selling something to that's going to generate the money for you to be able to avoid that, to purchase that Starship flight? That is a problem. We do fear that, and Elon came out and said this the other day, that Starlink is burning through cash, wads of cash. They're very much deploying the entire rest of Starlink, and investors have a lot of faith in the ability of that network to be able to produce revenue for SpaceX. But if Elon has built this factory to build Starships, and it's producing Starships, and they're sitting there in Boca Chica empty because nobody's buying them, that represents a very, very significant market problem for our sector. So I'm more than happy. I'm in 10 minutes into my slot, and I would much rather take the combined expertise and knowledge of the people, both from the panelists and the attendees, as a challenge. Start thinking about the things we're talking about in terms of lunar development. The rocket you need and the transportation costs that you need are going to exist by this time next year. And that means that the time for talking about what we're going to do on the moon has passed. Now becomes the time that to stop talking about it, find the customers, and actually start doing it as a business or as a government contractor or something, because the problem of launch has been solved. If you can't move forward at this point, then there's something else blocking it. And at least in my opinion, understanding what the capital markets are looking to fund and the continued questions that I get on when can I start investing in all this moon stuff, the answer becomes, once Starship is flying, some of these business models can start closing, but it needs people who understand how to build multi-billion-dollar businesses. It needs people who understand how to sell to customers. It needs people who, like Paragon, that know how to solve some of these problems at scale. And so sort of my challenge to the room is, if, assuming that we're now in July of 2022, Starships are coming off the assembly line, and you're starting to see already the tanker version of Starship and the cargo version of Starships sitting in orbit, ready to go. What are you doing to take advantage of that? And what are you doing right now to get ready for that? So now I'm looking for responses from everyone that's on the Zoom or the attendees. That's my challenge to everyone here, and I hope I don't end up hearing crickets. So I'm throwing down the gauntlet.
All right, Michael, I'll take a first stab at it, and I'm going to be completely self-serving about it. Okay.
That's the whole point.
Yep. So with my Lunar Homestead concept, the idea, people are going to go. We get the right technology, we open the doors and let them go. And let's consider that Starship is opening the doors. So I would think the primary payload, and one of the things that the end goal for what I'm working on are homestead kits that any group can buy and then put on a Starship and have landed at their location of choice and build out their settlement. So for me, that would be the end goal product that could be sold to people to put on Starships. And then if these settlements are then cranking out oxygen more than they need, you can land a tanker, refill it, take that back to near Earth space, and now you've got the start of a fuel economy, especially if we scrap the idea of going to the moon to extract water for fuel and instead invest a little bit of effort and research into developing oxygen metal engines that will then run off of very common lunar materials that can be found anywhere on the surface and not necessarily at limited locations, the poles. So if we have an oxygen aluminum engine, and these homesteads can then sell what they are creating in the process of actually creating their homesteads, then now you've got a bit of an economy going. That's kind of how I would foresee going at it with my concept.
Okay. Do you have a business plan that I can present to an investor?
Hardly. I am the worst person at monetizing my ideas. If somebody who is good at that would like to help me, that would be amazing. But otherwise, no. I'm focused on the tech.
And that's there are people coming into this industry that would like to be able to help someone figure out how to get the technology. Is just that it's marrying the technology to the story that you can then sell to someone.
Sure.
And I think one of the challenges is how do you get access to that someone and find them? I mean,
so I'd like to.
Sure.
Sorry, I'd like to address that. So that's what basically what my whole vision of building this sort of very integrative approach to bringing in academia, bringing in the general public, bringing in innovators, visionaries, and everybody to come together. And even though I'm saying, you know, you're coming into the mission, the idea is that that's a very new paradigm of a laboratory. To be able to come into mission is a laboratory out in the real world, right? With real-time simulation, with real people working on your technology, iterating it, validating it, proof of concept, and doing it on a longitudinal basis. In other words, the projects you bring in, and it doesn't have to be technology, because we just don't just focus on technology. We're looking at human factors, we're looking at procedures, SOPs, everything else, right? So you come into this new paradigm of a laboratory in the real world, real people, real time, and really testing out and be able to do it over a period of time to collect the data, because data is important, right? So that you can prove your proof of concept, you can then validate and iterate. And in the business model, if you want to, you have to build what we call, the rapid prototyping, then you do the MVP, then you've got something, then you've got to try to sell it. And then once you've got that as initial building block, you can go out and get your investors first, seed, angel, and then so on and so forth. I think we're already a business. We've been doing that. We're for profit. We're a C Corp. The point is that that's what is going to change this whole sort of structure that we have been like pounding our heads is, how do we want to bring in people from, that are not in the choir? How do we then make it into a business that makes money? Because if it doesn't make money, which is the sad point, at this point in juncture of our human civilization, if it doesn't make money, it goes nowhere. Then the third question is, how do we acquire the money, right? So you got to go back, step back, and you say, all right, then you've got to find the communities and the individuals that work collectively to be able to address all these problems from a very foundational place. And that is what we're doing. So yes, MMARS is an organization, but we are very collaborative and cooperative from all sectors of the community, from academia to citizen scientists to, mom, pa, startup companies and to, the commercial sectors, right? There's established coming in together and having this ability, engaging together to solve these issues. And if we don't, we'll always be siloed, as the word, and we'll always be asking these same questions year after year. And I'm not a spring chicken, by the way. I saw Neil Armstrong step on the moon when I was 7. I wanted to be an astronaut over 45 years ago, and I'm still going to try, but I also want to be able to say, let's move this forward. But if we don't have this conversation as one, if we're always going to be in our own little niche area, we'll never be able to move forward. And I'm very focused, and I'll end on this, very much on the new conversation, the new right stuff, the new communities that we're creating. And that's what we're doing here is only a very tiny, small part of that vision, right? But it is, and I always could say it's space for all, but it's great to say it, but how do we put it into action? And we then say, really sort of convey that message to everybody. We're working with undeveloped countries. It's the talent there from Cambodia, from Philippines. They're not in the conversation now. How many individuals in these conferences, and I've been in many, that you could say are from that population sector? They don't, because first they maybe don't even have Wi-Fi, right? I mean, so how can we answer these questions when we ourselves as a community are not working together as one? If you're a developer, if you're a technology, if you are a juggler, by the way, we're working with a juggler who's also an astrophysicist coming into the mission, but also using that experience as a platform to engage others, to say, you don't need to be X, Y, and Z. You don't have to have this label. If you're interested, you're passionate, come in and let's work together. But I'll go back to Michael Mealing, where he said, yeah, you have to have a vision and a model that makes money. But money can also be indirect because it's energy. So human resource energy is also money in an indirect form.
It is in an indirect form, but at the end of the day, the bills come due and they have to be paid with some form of currency. And I think that's one of the challenges is that I'm trying to formulate is, I guess what I'm suggesting is the time for analogs and analysis and modeling is over. Now is the time for the doing, the actual doing of it, where people are actually putting up themselves onto the surface of the moon by the end of 2023, 2024, and habitats are being built and things are being built and people are probably dying in the process.
Absolutely.
And that, I think the challenge that I have for everyone is it's time to create the organizations that can have the lawyers and the managers and the executives and the project managers and the compliance officers the HR representatives to handle the staff, everything else, to actually start bending metal that will be on the surface of the moon by this time next year. The time to talk about it has finished, and the time to actually start doing it is right now.
And I think if we drill down on that, Michael, I think one of the key problems that we need to resolve is, and I can take my personal example, I'm interested in the tech. I'm pretty good at working on that. I have no business acumen. I have none of that other stuff you just mentioned. How do you put someone who is very good at one thing together with other people who are very good at the other critical components and make something unified that can actually then go out and do? Because I think the expectation is, oh, if you've got an idea or if you're working on this, you also have to figure out how to be an excellent businessman and all this other stuff. And for a lot of us, we just don't want to learn all that. We're happy doing what we enjoy. So I think finding a way to get people with the correct interests and specialties to work together is very critical.
I just want to answer Ben. Yeah, so when I first started, I was all right brain, dominant, because I went to creative, and then I went into medicine. Then I had to learn how to navigate the creative, the left and right, make them balance out, and then also bringing in the business acumen. That's the hardest part, was how do I become an entrepreneur? So what, because something drives you, if something drives you, it will take you there because you want to, because it will help to enable you to achieve your end goals or your end objective. So I put myself to learn about business. I went into entrepreneurships. I went into the business sector. I went and actually educated myself. So if you really want to do something and there's an obstacle there, that's really basically the message. Whatever it is, you just got to go and you got to kick that bloody obstacle down and acquire the knowledge and acquire the information that you need that will then help you continue and traverse on your pathway to get to that end point. So life is not easy. We all know this, right? And there are aspects of this where you go, oh, I didn't want to be a business person. But I said, okay, if I want to achieve what I want to achieve, I have to learn. I don't need to be a specialist, but I need to go and find these areas. I need to go and, fill in these deficits that I'm lacking. So one, I can have a better comprehension of the problems that will come up at a later stage downstream. So to address what you just said, Ben, and for everyone here, and especially the younger generations that are listening in, my message is, if you really are passion driven, you have vision where you want to go, that will be your moonshot, what we call the Mars shot. And yeah, there will be challenges along the way. There'll be pitfalls, but those are the experiences that you got to go through and learn, but never give up. And so, yes, go and learn, go and attain that knowledge. You don't need to pay for it either. There's so many free information, but be careful where you get information from as well, right? So that is really what I went through that myself, and I want to share that with everyone here. It's not easy, but if it's easy, everybody would be doing it. So never let anything stop you. That's really what I'm trying to convey. And that's really, what's the incentive and the motivation. And I think lastly, I want to say this is, if you want to change behavior, you have to look at that behavior and you have to say, okay, how do I incentivize that individual so that they would want to, because they're incentivized. That's why X Prize is a wonderful platform, what they've achieved, amazing stuff, because X Prize with Peter B. Diamandis, that started that was incentivization. And that is part of our humanness, that if we're not incentivized, if there's no ROI or return on investment in our energy, contribution or participation, we don't want to engage. There has to be some form of ROI. And like I said, whether it's your own personal growth or you're going to make, next $1 trillion because you're going to develop the new space mining industry, doesn't matter. That is the ultimate, I think the baseline is, how do you incentivize individuals to change behavior?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Susan, and I agree that works for some people. But I know from personal experience, and I'm sure there's others out there who don't want to learn about business or large complex project management, or to figure out how to build a multi-billion-dollar business and sure, there will be people who will kick down doors and learn whatever they need to learn and do all that other stuff. But I think that if we want to expand our base of what we can put on a starship, maybe we need to come up with another paradigm where we match people with the important interests and skills, and instead of relying on one person to be the Uber CEO who does everything, we have a way to team people up to get things done.
Yeah,
mean,
well,
I could go learn business if I want. I just don't want to.
So Ben, I wasn't saying that you had to force yourself. Nobody ever learns or acquire information if they don't have joy in what they're doing. So yes, if you want to be part of this big vision, and it takes a village to build whatever the settlement in the future, whatever, right? It takes lots of people. So if you're not interested in learning about that particular sector of the field, then what you need to do is find the connections and network, and then you align yourself. Because the one thing that we all know is to get into that room with those people and be around that table and be invited to participate in the conversation is one of the hardest challenge to get to open that door. But then once the door is open, how do you stay in the room and then have a seat at the table? So yes, I agree. I never force anyone. Please don't ever do anything that you hate and you're not passionate about. That will kill your soul, it'll kill your spirit, and it'll kill your idea right from the start. So that's really what I'm trying to convey, Ben.
Right, and maybe that's what the Moon Society could do, is be that facilitator.
Yeah. And I just want to come back to Ben. The reason I bring it up in terms of the project management and that kind of thing is because of the people on at this conference are sort of, some of the leaders within the industry, and especially people watching this on YouTube later. It's kind of a call to action to the rest of the entire lunar industry. And it's coming up on 4:30 my time, so I think it's time to kind of wrap up. Please feel free to reach out to me directly or anybody at the society on this particular topic. Whether I'm wearing my Moon Society hat or my Starbridge Venture Capital hat. Always happy to talk about this particular topic. And so I think at this point we kind of hand it back over to Michael for him to take his time. So thanks for flipping with me, man.
Thanks, Joe. Fascinating conversation. I started talking about the Starship Singularity. Michael Mealing and I were on another call in another event, and he was kind of pounding that drum, and I said, well, everything changes, and so that kind of the mashup of Starship Singularity kind of got born a couple months ago. But I feel like it's a really, really important topic that is pretty well not understood. It's not an understood problem. He illuminated it to me. I think I add a little bit of nuance to it. And if we don't figure out what to do with this massive capability, maybe that massive capability is not going to be available to us, right? Like, how can you continue to have a workforce of, I think I heard the last number was 7,500 people at SpaceX. Mm-hmm. How can you have a workforce of 7,500 people and you're currently losing money on Starlink? I don't think that you will for long term. But if you're also currently losing money in Starship assembly, even the second richest guy in the world can't sustain that forever. So I just feel like it is time for our industry, and I mean global industry, to figure out what to do with this massive capacity, because one Starship is equal to about 30 rockets that launched in Q1. It's half. It's about half the capacity of the 30 rockets that launched in first quarter 2021. Right. So it's a remarkable capacity, and if we don't figure out how to use it, it may not be available. I think they're going to go immediately to point-to-point suborbital and it's not going to be destinations to the moon. It's going to be limited destinations to Leo and Geo, and lots of destinations to go from, in my case, Seattle to Tokyo in 45 minutes. I think that's the only market that justifies a fleet of 100 or 1,000 starships all of a sudden.
And Michael, I think one of the things that some people are aware of when you look at Starship, it's not just the capability of one Starship. It's the capability of that factory down in Boca Chica to produce hundreds of starships.
Yes.
A starship a week.
Yes.
When I talk to people about the plan for going to Mars, they think in terms of one rocket going to Mars and people on it. I'm like, no, that rocket's going to have people on it, and they're going to have 12 to 24 other ones behind it, or ones that have already gone that don't come back. And
right.
it's the manufacturing capability that's game changing as well.
There's going to be a time really, really soon where somebody doesn't buy one rocket at a time, they buy a fleet of 5 or 10 or 20, and that changes the world. That's why I talk about it in the terms of singularity, because you literally can't predict what the future looks like with this massive capability that's added to the equation.